The title of my talk is No One Belongs Here More Than You. And it is the title that I actually stole it from a book of short stories by Miranda July. Have any of you ever read anything by Miranda July? Oh, you are absolutely missing out. She is an amazing author. And it's a book of short stories that really resonates with me because each and every one of the stories in this anthology is really a kind of like a mundane setting. It's very much the everyday, except that for the characters and the way that the characters interact with each other is anything but mundane. It's all about how they suffer with the perception of themselves and how they cope with how they interact with one another, how they feel whether like they belong or whether they, on the whole, are completely on the outside, which is something that I've spent quite a lot of my life resonating with. So the title of this talk is also the title of a talk that I did in 2017 at BelongCon, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about later. But essentially, the BelongCon started as a kind of event like this. And I spoke at one of the first ones about my experience of mental health. And it was the most terrifying experience of my life. Until that point, I had done a lot of public speaking. I work in an industry that requires me to stand up and talk about really exciting things like data analysis and how to speak to your customers. And that was always fine. Obviously it scared me, but it wasn't the same kind of fear as standing out in front of a group of strangers and telling my story. And what happened during that conversation and that talk was that I firstly stood up, amazing, and I didn't realise that I was going to tell my whole story. And my story is one of extremely dark depression, and I suffered with depression for about 10 years, from the age of about 11 to about the age of 21. And during that period, I tried to kill myself 3 times. And I had no idea that I was going to stand up there and actually say those words in front of all of those people, in front of my mum, who was sitting in the front row, and obviously that was really emotional for her. And also on camera, so in front of what is now thousands of people have watched that story. So yeah, I feel a bit emotional even just talking about it now, and it was almost 2 years ago. So today, I'm standing here again today, but I'm not going to talk to you about my experience of mental health. But instead, I'm going to talk to you of my experience of when I first spoke publicly about my experience of mental health. Because for me, that was a far more empowering adventure. It changed my whole life in so many ways that I'm going to try to condense for you guys now into the next 15 minutes. And to give you a little bit of context around that is, for me, before I first stood up there and first told my story, I felt such a deep-rooted sense of shame about the experiences that I had had with my mental health. So put your hands up, and it doesn't have to be mental health related, but put your hands up if you've ever felt so ashamed of something that you just couldn't tell a single person about it. See, a lot of people have. In fact, I would wager pretty much everybody has felt that way at some point in their lives. And for me, it was debilitating. And I remember once when, obviously you all know, when Robin Williams killed himself. And at that time, I was a regular blogger for the Huffington Post. And I had a platform, and I had people who listened to me, and I was an influencer within my own right, but always about the safe topics, always about things that didn't really involve me or weren't personal to my life. And I said to my mum, I have a story to tell. I should tell this. People need to hear what it's like to be in that dark place. And it's not selfish, and it's not all of the stuff that the media is making out it is. It's a completely different situation from that. And she said, don't do that. She said, if you do that, it will ruin your career. She said, if you do that, people will think of you differently. And if you go to an interview, that people will say, they'll think of you in that way, and they might think of you as being a danger. And I know that sounds like my mum was really out of order, but she was really just trying to protect me because the fear thing in her head was going all kinds of crazy, and she was projecting that onto me. And I listened to her, and I took that on board, and I thought, I can't tell my story because people are going to judge me for it. And do you know what happened when I did tell my story? People did not judge me for it. That was the first thing that happened. The most amazing thing that actually happened when I told my story was that it resonated with people, so that people suddenly started to come to me and to tell me their story. And that was even more amazing than standing up there and telling my own story, because suddenly I was creating this space that was safe, that I had gone, I've been vulnerable and I've been scared and I've been at the bottom of that well. And the bottom of the well is an analogy that I use to describe what it's like to have depression, because it really highlights to anyone who doesn't know what that feels like, what it's like to be so detached from everything that's going around you. And you can look at your hand and not even be able to see it sometimes because it's so dark. And people can shout down the well to you, and you can just hear it as a reverberation or an echo of what they're saying. So you know that they're saying something, but it doesn't quite resonate with you. And I could be that space for people who had been down at that bottom of that well. And I could be the space for people who were still at the bottom of that well. Because suddenly they knew that it was okay for them to also share their stories and be vulnerable alongside with me, which was absolutely incredible. So from that point, I thought, okay, I've done it now. What more can I do? Because that's actually something that people don't tell you, is once you take that first step, once you kind of take that first, oh no, I can't do it, and I'm gonna, and you do it, it's like, oh, that was all right. And then you take another step, and it's, oh, okay, that was fine. And then you take so many more steps that the next thing you know, you look behind and you're like, wow, like how have I come this far? And that's how I feel actually thinking about that tonight, is how am I, the person that is standing here now, the same person that I was just 18 months ago, who was shaking and kind of doing this and going, ooh, in front of the first audience that I spoke about this to. So from that point on, Alice and I, worked together to create more spaces for people to tell their stories. And BelongCon, which Alice, who's my business partner, hey Alice, BelongCon, where I first spoke about my story, that was set up by Alice just before she and I went into business together, so in March 2017, and I spoke at the third one in October 2017. And at that time, it was it was an amazing event, a kind of conference just like this, which was all about helping people to find a sense of belonging. And from that point, we thought, this is amazing, but we want to dream bigger. We want to take stories further, give more people the opportunity to tell their stories and have their stories heard. Because that's another thing. It's not just about talking about your experiences. It's about being heard. It's about listening to people. And it's an amazing thing when you think about it, because we are all connected and we all connect to each other through our stories. So that was the kind of goal for us with BelongCon, was to take this connection and this sense of belonging and this ability to share our stories with one another even further than the conference that was happening twice a year. So I worked with Alice to set up the BelongCon blog, which I then did a call out to all the people who'd come to me after I'd first shared my experience to ask them if they wanted to share their story. And of course, at first, in the same way that I was, people were really scared to do it. And they went away and they said, I want to think about this, I really want to, but that kind of, again, the brain going, don't do it, danger, danger. And eventually, pretty much every single person who had approached me initially came back with their story, which was raw and beautiful and all of the things that, that is important about being a human, just taken from in here and put out here. And then from putting it out here, other people took it and could relate to it and could say, yes, me too, I understand that experience. I feel the same way that you feel. And suddenly we were changing people's lives, really. Like, it sounds really grandiose, but it's true. Because that simple fact of providing a space for people to be heard and then taking stories to other people for them to feel like they can connect to it, that simple human connection absolutely changes people's lives. I mean, it definitely changed my life. And so from that point on, again, it was like, okay, this is great. So the blog was up and running. Alice started doing the podcast and inviting people to speak, which got us even further out there so we could reach more and more people. And I thought, okay, I've talked about my experience of mental health and attempted suicide. What more can I talk about through my experiences that could help other people? So I started to tour around the country and talk at different events about my experiences of drug addiction and narcissistic relationships and different experiences around abuse, which, as Sally was saying earlier, all of these things obviously kind of come into your brain and muddle around and create this beautiful little, am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
Beautiful little fucked up soup in your head that kind of feels all consuming sometimes. But again, through the process of sorting it out and making it not have any control over me anymore, and instead using it as a tool to help others and to connect with others, bit by bit by bit, that fucked up soup became some kind of beautiful cocktail of wonder. Great with my metaphors today. And bit by bit, it wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about my experiences anymore. It was about taking those experiences and telling them to people so that they could resonate with it and that they could feel like they could then do the same with their experiences. And so through this process, what I really learned about myself was that I didn't believe until this point that I was lovable. I had a fundamental belief that I was unlovable that narrated every single thing that I did in my life. And it was exactly as Sally was saying, it was keeping me small. It was holding me back. It was the voice in my head that said, why even bother? And through putting myself out of my comfort zone and talking about my most rawest, shameful, although I no longer find them so, but at the time, shameful experiences, kind of really brought that to the forefront and really made me face up to where those deep-rooted beliefs about myself were coming from. And through that whole process came this amazing relationship that I started to form with myself, which I never really thought would happen. I never even really thought it was something I needed to work on. And so again, through this traveling around and sharing my experiences and meeting new people and hearing about their experiences, a whole nother layer opened up to me. And that layer was the layer of myself. And I was like, oh, you're all right. And I spent a lot of time in the last year particularly, a lot of time really kind of getting into the nitty-gritty about all of the things all of those limiting beliefs that were keeping me small and that were causing that shame in the first place. And I did things that I never thought I would do. So this is as well as doing BelongCon. I also did burlesque, which I was really sassy about. And I was terrified. And until the point that we actually got up onto that stage and started taking our kit off to a room full of strangers, more so many than you are, I was like, oh God, I can't, oh God. Oh. And it was like, boom, yeah. I was like, oh, Sophie. And these things, again, like pushing it just that little bit further, I think you can do it. And if you can't, then who cares? Like, what's the worst that can happen? And so there was that, and then also there was what essentially came from the whole self-love thing was that we decided that we really wanted to create a space that was specifically about the value of self-love. So for the first time last week, just over a week ago, in this very room, we launched the Self-Love Sessions, which are a every 3 months event which has speakers from all kinds of different areas talking about how they found a sense of self-love. And it was something that I'd been working on for months, and it was really scary. And again, for whatever reason, because this happens an awful lot, for whatever reason, I kept finding excuses not to create the event. And eventually it was like, all of this process, everything that I've shared with you today, all was possible for taking that step, being vulnerable, sharing experiences, creating a space for other people to share their experiences. So for some reason I was kind of stuck with this event, and I think it was because it meant so much to me that I was like the kid that was scared no one would come to their party. You know, you're like, I don't care anyway, it's fine. And you're like, no, actually this is important, and it's important enough, once again, to put myself out there and to be vulnerable. So yeah, so we did it. We actually did it, and it was more terrifying than I feel tonight, and I feel every time I stand up and do public speaking. But it was amazing, and it was, again, it wasn't about me, and it wasn't about BelongCon. It was about the speakers who were there sharing their story in such a raw and authentic way, and it resonated with everybody in the room in one way or another. So that then brings me back to you guys. So the title of my talk is No One Belongs Here More Than You, and it is the title of a book of short stories by Miranda July. If I say it enough times, maybe you'll read it, because it's really good. And it's the title of a talk that I did for the first time about my experience of mental health. And it is an invitation to all of you. So put your hands up if sometimes you feel like you just don't really belong. Okay. Put your hands up if you feel like sometimes, for example, you might be looking through Instagram, the usual, and going, oh, they seem to have it all figured out. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing day to day. I definitely haven't had that experience. Okay, less of you than I thought. Are you guys sure? Because I feel like everyone's had that experience. Okay, put your hands up if you have ever felt like you know, it's amazing that someone else does that, but you could never do that. It's too far out of your reach. Great. Put your hands up if any of you have watched me tonight or will watch any of the other speakers and think, I mean, great, good for them, but oh God, no, I would never do that. That's great. So the rest of you are going to be speaking at the next Inspiring Talk.
2 whiskey biscuit slots available, by the way.
Fantastic. I want to see all of your names on that list. Okay, so you know, this is the thing, is it's so unbelievably common to doubt ourselves, and Sally kind of stole some of my talk, but she just like reaffirmed it, so it's fine. but basically, you know, what I was going to say is that this is the subconscious's way of keeping us safe, and it's just doing its job. And I often do, when it does that for me, when it tells me I can't do something. Like, first of all, I hate being told I can't do something. So, but even by my own brain, I'm like, no. But I like to go, you know, thank you very much. Like, thank you, because it's only doing its job. Like, we can't be angry with it. It's just trying to keep us from, you know, dying. Yeah. Like, well, it doesn't know. But, you know, to thank it and say, you know, thank you very much, and I'm going to do it anyway. So I invite you all to say to yourself next time you hear your brain telling you that you can't do something, or that someone else could do something more, or that you don't belong in this conference room, or in this pub, or in this relationship, or in any situation where you might feel like you're just not quite right for it, I invite you to say, thank you very much, and you're not necessary right now, or thank you very much, and I'm going to do it anyway. So to kind of help to get that into your brains just a little bit more, I would like you to close your eyes, and in your head, repeat after me. No one belongs here more than me. I didn't mean to say out loud, this is better. No one belongs here more than me. 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 That's giving me chills, guys. Okay, so open your eyes. And it's true. It really is true. And the thing to remember, the thing that I think is just the most beautiful thing about being alive is that we are all, every single one of us, whether we say we are or not, a beautiful, complicated, messy, amazing, capable bunch of brilliance, just exactly being who we are. And Alice, I just have her on my mind all the time. Like Sally was saying, like, even if you think that how amazing the body is at healing, like I had a second degree burn not too long ago, and I had the great pleasure of sitting on my ass and watching it heal because it was on my foot, so I couldn't really do anything else. And it's just amazing. It's amazing to see what the body is capable of. And it's amazing what the brain is capable of because it creates our reality. What we tell ourselves about ourselves is our reality. What we tell ourselves we are capable of is what we are capable of. So when you switch the language, when you suddenly tell yourself that you are capable of something and that you do belong here, then think about all of the things that you can achieve and think about all of the amazing stories that you can create and that you can share and that you can build with other people through that shared connection. Because it really, truly, truly is true that nobody belongs here more than you. Thank you very much.